Today we'll be discussing writing for TV and movies and the Hollywood writers' strike with screenwriter Ramona Barkert. This is Doctor vs. Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja. This is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode, what we normally do is I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic from medicine and health and grills me on that topic. But today is a special episode. Today we'll be discussing writing for television and the movies with award-winning screenwriter Ramona Barkert. And we'll also be discussing the Hollywood writers' strike.
We're very pleased to have Ramona Barkert on the show today. Ramona is a screenwriter whose credits include the movies At Home by Myself with You and Ordinary Days and the sci-fi show Wynona Earp. She was the creator of the Canadian television series Open Heart and was nominated for an Emmy Award when she wrote in Degrassi and recently won a Canadian Screen Award for her work on Hulu's The Hardy Boys. Ramona Barkert, welcome to Doctor vs. Comedian.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I mean, we didn't have a choice.
Okay,
Your agent called and said, you do this or you guys are finished.
Yeah.
He was extremely aggressive about it.
This is why he gets the cut of my, he's doing his job. Great.
Yeah. Well, good. You let him know to call his dogs off because we're doing this. Asif and I talk about entertainment a fair amount on the show. Pretty much every episode will cover entertainment. Sometimes we forego the medical. And that's what we're doing, unless there's something you have going on medically that you'd like to ask Asif about. But otherwise, we're happy to go. No medical this week because, we've talked about writing rooms a little bit as far as what I know about writing rooms, but there's definitely a curiosity that both Asif and I have, and I'm certain that our listeners do, about how one becomes a screenwriter. And I'm sure no two screenwriters' paths are identical. But I did want to start by digging in on how you became a screenwriter.
Yeah, I basically started writing when I was a kid. I was always writing short stories, plays, poetry, different things like that. And I think when I reached my teens, actually the love of film and television came from my mom. She was a huge, watcher of every show that ever existed. She was a huge soap opera fan. Some of my early watches were Young and the Restless after school with her. We loved the primetime soap, Dallas, Falcon Crest. We had a whole schedule of TV watching that we did together. And I think, when I was writing my little stories, it always came from that sort of, character-based, action-y, plot-heavy kind of place. I didn't write literary, missives about anything. It was always coming from a very, TV film kind of focus. So I think when I got into my teen years, you just kind of get that awareness of somebody's writing these things. There's actually people doing this and coming up with these stories and episodes of TV. And I just kind of grew an awareness of that and was I don't know, maybe 15. I was I'm just going to write a movie, just for myself. I'm just going to try it out and see what happens. And you kind of gather all your resources and your Sid Field books and try to figure out how to plot things the way the pros are doing it. And, I kind of kept doing that. And I got into university. I went to York University and I did an English degree, which meant a lot of, reading, multiple novels over semesters. And I did kind of I need a break from reading. I'm going to go do a little bit of film. And so I think it was just sort of an amalgamation of all those sort of forces in my life that kind of brought me to screenwriting as a potential career.
And when you were doing your English degree, you were doing that because you still wanted to get into screenwriting?
I think I was doing it because I had a love of story. I wanted to read as much as possible and as widely as possible. And that seemed like a good way of going about it. You're kind of forced into the situation of reading, 10 to 12 novels at a time and assessing and processing how the stories are told. I always felt like I was a writer. I didn't maybe know exactly specifically how that was all going to end up. Was I going to be a fiction writer? Was I going to write plays? Was I going to be a screenwriter? So I think when I picked English degree, I was like, this, at least this gives you such a breadth of education in storytelling, no matter the format. You're going to get it doing a degree like that. So it kind of came from there. And what ended up happening in my actual first foray into screenwriting was I had a mutual friend who was at Ryerson, formerly known as Ryerson University. He was in the film and television program, and he was doing a fourth year short film project. Like every sort of graduate has to do this sort of fourth year project. And we knew each other, and we kind of knew we both had a love for kind of a certain type of storytelling and an approach to filmmaking. And he asked me to write that short film for him. He wanted someone that was kind of outside of sort of the group of grads that were coming out of Ryerson. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's try it. I'm up for anything. So I wrote that for him. They went and shot it, did really well. It was very highly lauded. And they do all these screenings for the grads. They kind of do these sort of film festival-y kind of nights. And one of the screenings actually attracted sort of the interest of an agent, Glenn Coburn, who at the time was at the Characters. He saw the film and kind of approached Chris Booth, was my friend's name, and asked him, he's always kind of curating young filmmakers and young talent in Toronto. And he asked to speak to me because he really, liked the writing, liked the film, liked the way it all turned out, thought it was pretty inventive and interesting. And so my initial conversation was with him, and he said, look, like, if you want to be a screenwriter, if you want to do this as a career, I think you have the talent. And now we just have to build towards actually getting into the industry. And I was like, again, great. Like, let's see what happens. Let's do it up. And so it was kind of like, me always practicing it on my own, figuring it out, and a couple of serendipitous moments and lucky breaks. And then I was kind of off and running from there.
And that, just to add some trivia into this, that short film you're talking about, was that the beginning of At Home by Myself with You?
No, that was a subsequent project. The short film that we did was called No Man's Land, which was a World War I drama in a trench. The whole film took place in a trench, and it was sort of about the soldiers in a trench. There was no reason for Chris to come to me and say, hey, can you write this?
Given your experience with trenches.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I could do this. Yeah. So it was, let's try it. It was, let's try something big and epic and crazy and see what we can make happen. But that was the start of Chris and I's partnership, which eventually led to us writing At Home by Myself with You together.
Right. Which was where my trivia was going to be. I derailed my own trivia by asking you the wrong thing or assuming the wrong thing. But my agency is the Characters. They recently changed the location of their offices. Okay. And so I went to my agent's new office, and right there, the only poster he had on his wall at this point was a poster of At Home by Myself with You.
That's amazing.
And I saw your name. And I was like, this is my friend. Like, we know this woman. Asif has mentioned her so many times, and there she is on my agent's wall.
Yeah.
And he said that he had something to do with that as well. I think you guys were, I don't know if you were sent on this mission, or you took it upon yourself to go disappear.
Yeah.
Hotel, the woods. I don't remember. Someplace.
We huddled into my parents' basement for 3 days and cranked out a first draft.
Yeah.
And that was, back in the early 2000s. Like, we raised the funding to make that movie through a pocket change initiative where Chris was he worked at Casting Link at the time and had a jar, and people would throw their spare change and we would roll it up, and we built our budget that way. We had funders come in. This was like before Kickstarter, before GoFundMe. Like, it was just like this random thing that we kind of pulled together. And then there was a lot of goodwill towards Chris and myself and the project. And, we were able to get a great cast. And
yeah, the cast, by the way, especially for our Canadian listeners, quite a who's who here. The recently departed Gordon Pinsent narrated it. Shauna MacDonald is a name that people in the theater world really, really, they revere her. I don't know, is Kristen Booth Chris's sister?
No.
No. Okay. No. The two booths, double booths, double your booth.
They have the same name. It's spelled the same way. It's very weird. It was very odd, but we kind of just fine. Yeah.
Aaron Abrams is in it. Aaron Abrams, also somebody who's, been working for a long time, but especially lately with Canadian viewers because of his co-starring role on Children Ruin Everything. He's well known. Raul Beneja is
he's
on the figure.
All of them.
Yeah, Brandon Furla. Great.
You had everybody there.
We had everybody. It was a great time.
So then, Ramona, how does that work then? So then you're this agent, they took you on right after the initial film, and then they
It
kind
was
of...
kind of a casual, let's, work together, see where we can get your writing kind of thing. I was non-union at the time, no credits. I
Non-union. Ugh.
it
Puh.
was like for a minute.
Yeah,
We're going to talk about unions, I guess, very
we've all
soon,
been
but
there.
yes,
We've all been there.
yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So, but I didn't even have a spec, like I didn't have a sample at all. I had this short film that I had written and a bunch of garbage that I would never show anyone ever in my drawer. And, my agent, Glenn Colburn, who is still my agent today and started Meridian Artists after he moved on from characters. But at the time was like, hey, let's just write something and I'll work on it with you. And we'll just go through the process of getting a really good sample script.
So your agent worked with you.
Absolutely. It was I know that's not a normal experience, especially now getting into the industry. But at the time, Glenn is a very hands-on agent. He loves storytelling. He loves working with writers. I was lucky because I was kind of in those earlier days where I was kind of one of those original 20 that he kind of took under his wing and worked with them. But it was just kind of, again, another serendipitous thing where I had someone who believed in my talent and skill and wanted to help me build a career and was willing to put in extra effort to help me get my skills in a place. And my actual first job was a non-union job. So sorry. But, it was a half-hour comedy / hybrid lifestyle show called The Smart Woman Survival Guide, which was an idea that producer Al McGee had, but didn't have a writer to kind of make it a real show. And my agent was like, hey, check out Ramona. She's kind of, something and might be a good fit for you. And we worked together to create that show and it ended up getting ordered. And, we did 3 seasons of it. And that was my first gig in the industry. And that all came from just, support and encouragement and, belief and me just going for it, I think was kind of how I got into it. I was just like, I don't know, let's try, and ended up working out.
So then, Ramona, when it comes down to that show, for example, did you have a spec script of something else that you showed them? Or was it like, oh, here's the plot of the show. Can you write a sample episode?
I think at that time it was a meeting where we talked about the show, the genesis of the show and what it could be and how it could work. And then I think I went away and kind of put a pitch together, put some ideas down, and then went back and kind of pitched them on what I thought it would be and who the characters would be and how you could do a half-hour comedy / lifestyle hybrid show where you would stop to kind of give lifestyle tips in the middle of a sequence. It was all just how it could actually function. And they were like, yeah, sounds cool. Let's go for it. So I think at that point, I think I was hired to write the pilot script. This was so long ago, but I feel like there was at least one script that I wrote, but it wasn't, it was a collaborative process. It wasn't kind of me just going and writing a script. I think I had to kind of, give them the gist of what I would want to do or how it could work originally.
As you talk about this sort of this idea of collaboration, it's interesting to me, the short film, it was just you going away, seeing what you could do. Then you're working with Chris Booth. Then you're working with Glenn.
Yep.
You and Al McGee. Al, I happen to know, he met me when I was looking to create a cooking show. And lovely, lovely man.
Yep.
One of the nicest people that I met in Toronto. But you can't talk about writing or being a screenwriter without talking about a writing room. How do you graduate from these solo and duo projects into being part of a room? Is it, again, somebody just sort of taking a chance on you in a limited role and that grows?
Yeah, once Smart Women Survival Guide got ordered and we I think, had 13 episodes first season, they built out a room. I was too junior at that time to run the room. So they brought in Claire Ross Dunn, who was a bit more senior at the time. She filled out the room with sort of a myriad of other writers, and we worked on breaking the story. And that is an ideal, I realize that is not a normal situation to be brought on to create something and then be able to stay in the room, but also learn and sort of kind of it's a training module, and I think Al and a few other sort of legendary institutions that I've been lucky enough to work in have really been important in me learning how to be in a writer's room. And I've been in a lot of different ones. I've learned a lot from people doing things that I love and people doing things that I don't like so much. You kind of take away from every experience, something. But I think the transition to doing it on your own and, it's jarring. You think you know everything and how the show should be. And having come from the position of creating the show to kind of now taking a not secondary role, but like now I have to work with other people.
Yeah.
It's, you have to be confident in yourself and your ideas. And you also have to believe other people can bring something to it as well. You can't, you don't have all the answers. We have all the answers. That's kind of the best way to go through that.
So maybe you could tell us, how does it usually work in terms of how you get into that, and then what the process would be? You said breaking the story. Like, how does that usually work?
Getting into a writer's room, like just
why don't we
getting
start
the
with
gig.
that?
Yeah, I think the general way that it kind of works nowadays is you, as a writer, you write samples. You really have to have written a bunch of them because your first 3 are going to stock, and you need to keep trying and not be discouraged. I don't say
those are the ones in your drawer.
Yeah, those are the ones in the drawer. But honestly, like to me, I'm like, if you get to 5 scripts and you're still doing it, and you're still, like you're like, I can do this. I'm getting better. I think you're in a good spot. If you're only 1 or 2, forget it. Like you need 5. Then come talk to me. But it really is about getting a great sample or 2 or 3 that you can show to people, and people being other writers, showrunners, agents. It's really about kind of building that network of people so that when a writer's room is looking for junior story editors or they have positions that opened up, you're top of mind, or you come, and again, it's kind of luck. Like if you write a great half-hour comedy script that someone read 8 months ago, and now they have a comedy show that just got a green light and they're looking for a junior, and you wrote something that they still remember, like you might get that call and you might be able to be brought in for that meeting. So basically, it's a lot of, timing that you have no control over, and a great meeting. Like if you go into that meeting and you kind of kill it, then you're probably going to get in the room.
I was just hosting a couple events for the Forest of Reading. I don't know if you know the Forest of Reading, Ontario. The Provincial Library Association here has this Forest of Reading. So different age groups. I would just tell our listeners, read at a different sort of forest level. You Silver Birch is like ages, 4 to 6. Silver Birch Express is different. And so you move all the way up. So one of the events I was hosting was the White Pine Award, which is grades 9 to 12. And it was pitched to me as like students who are like, these are the English majors. These are the people who are going to be really focused on their own writing and reading and literature. And grade 9 to 12, mostly female. So it was exactly the same attitude as my 17-year-old daughter. So I felt pretty at home. And it was some hard work, but it was an interesting event. And the writers in that event, a lot of them are echoing some of the stuff you've been saying, which is that they started at 15, 16, 17, had to get a lot of no's and had to sort of find a way to swim through that.
Yep.
And find ways to just believe in themselves. And that was the message they were trying to give these young students as well. The big difference, of course, is there's no writing room for, a YA author or a novelist. It's very alone. So I wanted to ask, are you happier in a writing room? Do you like the collaboration, or are you happier like, I don't want to bounce off anybody. I don't want my stuff to be rejected. I'd rather be a solo act. Give me something. I go away with it and I come back.
It depends. I will say it is very hard to write a pilot on your own.
Sure.
I've done it a bunch of times. All I want to do
versus a film? Is a film easier, or just writing anything?
Difficult because it's so long. It takes forever. There's so many scenes. It's all hard. Alone in a room, it's all hard. I love being in a room. I think it's the most fun way to spend your time because it's mostly just nonsense. Like it's just fun. You're getting paid to do this. It's just a great time. There is a part of me that really enjoys the alone process as well. And whether that is, long form, fiction, anything, like I do need my time alone to do my work. But gosh, sometimes I'm just like, I just want to get in a room with 3 other people and just figure this out. And it would be so much better if I could. And I think, anyone who wants to write for TV needs to love being with other people, or it's not going to work. You know, the whole process of a writing room eventually, ideally, is we're all just going to hive mind into this show and these characters, and it's just going to be in our bodies, and we're all going to like be thinking about it all the time, and it's the only thing we want to talk about, and like we're just in love, and you know, and then once the gig's over, we never talk again. No, I'm kidding. No. But you know, I think that if you don't want to do that, this is not for you. You should probably just write TV movies and features and stuff like that.
Well, I think you're very fortunate to have had some positive experiences too. I know a number of different gigs, you know, recurring in the country that are just not as, you know, it doesn't foster that type of camaraderie. Yeah. It's pitting people against each other. My first writing gig was a lot of, you know, pitching jokes and other writers going, pass, pass. That's a miss. That's a miss for me. And I'm like, what? I'm writing jokes for myself. I know I can say. So you have to really, again, the skin must be quite thick, I think.
Yeah,
so
I think
I don't know if you had to do all that.
Quite thick. And also, you know, the other thing when people ask me how to be in a room, my thing is whatever you're saying is neither bad nor good. There's no better or worse. It's all just something that we can continue to talk about. And, you know, rooms that you're describing, I know they exist and it sucks. It's, you know, why? Why is that the way it is? This is not a competition. We are all owning what we're doing here together, you know, and that comes from whoever's running it, to be honest, and who's at the top and who's making the decisions. Like that kind of vibe is not going to get anybody the best work. It's not. It's just, you know, so it's unfortunate that is true. And I've been very lucky to work with people who don't do that. Maybe next time. I don't know.
You never know.
Good luck. Good luck in Godspeed.
One that sucks. Yes. Yeah. So actually, can you just explain just to our listeners what a showrunner is? Because you kind of just alluded to that, the person in charge. Just let us know what that's all about.
Yeah. So a showrunner is kind of a a term that has become more publicly known to regular folk in recent years. I feel like it was maybe lost. J.J. Abrams was like the first kind of, you know, hey, he's a showrunner. And everyone's like, what does that mean? In sort of, you know, simple terms, it's the person at the top. And by the top, I mean below the network and people who write checks. You know, the person who is the creative stopper for the show. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be the creator of the show. In many cases, it is, but sometimes the creator is a junior person who doesn't have all the experience necessary to show run. So I always kind of describe it as a job in two parts. They run the writing room. They hire the writers. They're in charge of the creative. They sort of say, yes, no, this, that, and the other. Let's work on this. Let's kick that to the curb. They're kind of in charge of all the material that's going to come out of the room and go out into the world. That's sort of the first part of the job. They're also in charge of, you know, pitching up, talking to the network executives, talking to the producers and walking them through the creative and, you know, kind of selling what's going on in the writer's room as the best stuff ever. The second part of that job is outside the room, which is all the other stuff that is required to make a television show. Hiring your key creatives, your cinematographers, your directors, your casting director, all the casting. And they are the person at the end of the day that kind of makes the decision. You know, you have 5 actors, all the producers have a different idea of who, and usually they look at the showrunner and go, well, what do you think? And that person's, you know, the final person. That's who you blame. So, and then into production, you know, they're kind of managing all the questions that are going to come up during the course of production. Can this person wear this instead of that? Okay, yes, we need to revise the script. Can we shoot this inside instead of outside because it's raining? You know, like whatever, all the things that are going to come up over the course of a shoot. They're the person who has the answers because they are mostly ingrained in the scripts from episode 1 to episode 10 or however. And, you know, they're kind of in charge of everything that happens before and everything that ends up on screen is kind of the way to look at it.
I can add just one thing to that, Asif. In my experience, the words I've heard to describe a showrunner's job the most often, the adjectives are incredibly tiring and completely thankless. Yeah. Even though Ramona accurately described all of what they do, it's insane that it would be thankless, but it's really like, it feels like the best showrunners are the ones that you don't even really realize they're doing their job because they're doing it so well. So I think that's why it becomes a thankless job.
And because they've empowered everyone else to kind of like do it, all they're really doing is delegating and letting people kind of do their best work. There's a funny, I think it was Bill Prady, I could be wrong. He's like one of the Big Bang Theory guys. And he said, there's no retiring from show running. It's 100% burnout job. Like you just stop. Like you can't, there's no, like, you just have to stop doing it. Like, and that was, you know, back in the golden, like 22 episodes a season broadcast network world, where it's like, there's no just, I'm just going to like ease my way out of it. You just have to, you're done and you cannot do it anymore.
Your body just says.
It's interesting. We're going to get into just in a minute about some of these things about 22 episodes versus less episodes that we see on streamers, rooms, mini rooms, which we'll talk about in a second. But just two follow-up questions. When it comes to the writer's room, like, so say you're planning a season of television, right? It's 13 episodes. Do you all get together and sketch out, and then you assign each writer to a couple episodes? And then how much influence does another writer have on, say, the episode you're assigned? First of all, am I correct in that first assumption?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the first things when you get into a room is you work from big to little. So you start with the overarching season plot, you know, characters, where, you know, the characters starting, where the characters ending, each of them, you know, across the 13 episodes. And you work through a general shape for big things that are going to happen. And then you just kind of continue to sculpt and work down. And eventually you have sort of your season arc document, which will have kind of the shape and, you know, what the characters are going to go through, whatever the big cliffhanger is, or whatever the big high points are. And then you go, okay, now we're going to start breaking story, which means we start at episode 1 and we go, what the heck is this going to be? And basically you kind of pull, you know, from sort of that great brainstorming that you've done with your other writers, and you start to sort of figure out what those high beats are, you know, your teaser out, your cliffhanger out of the episode, your act 1, 2, 3 break, whatever, depending on what you're doing, hour or half hour. So then you get the shape of that episode. And then from there, then you get smaller. So now it's like, okay, what are the scenes in act 1 we need to get to from this point to that point, from that point to that point, all through the episode. And then you get smaller and you go into the scene and you go, how is this all going to shake out? So it's very much a big to little kind of process. And
but as a group, you're doing that?
As a group, everyone weighs in, everyone talks about it. Some rooms are different. I think on Degrassi, we had 2 rooms running, each room breaking 2 episodes, and you knew which episode you were breaking before that process started. We had done all the big character arcing and season-long arcing, but sort of the individual break, you knew it was your episode as you were breaking it. And sometimes, generally, you kind of have a kind of idea of which episode you're going to end up writing. Sometimes you're surprised. Sometimes things shift around for various reasons, and you think you're going to be writing episode 2 and you're actually writing episode 5, whatever. But for the most part, you don't necessarily know if you're writing the episode or not. So you're just kind of weighing in, brainstorming, pitching ideas, you know, without really knowing if you own it.
Right. And someone will say, okay, that's your episode. We put all this stuff together as this outline. Now you go and do it.
Yeah. You basically get the board, which is all the beats that you've come up with. And then you're kind of off you go. You go outline it, get feedback on the outline, get sent to draft. You draft it on, you know, the tricky thing is, to answer your question about, you know, how much influence someone has over your episode, is if you're working on a very serialized show and you're writing, you know, something very specific, and all of a sudden the showrunner's like, hey, that whole act that you were writing is now going to be in Joe Blow's episode now. And you're like, okay, great. So, you know, now we got to work over it again and figure out how to fill the gap. And, you know, that happened a lot on Degrassi because it was a very serialized show. And sometimes you would have character arc things and you're just like, we just need this in the other episode. We don't have a good ending. So we're going to take your teaser and now you got to move everything up and find some other stuff to do. It's a process. It's just a constant working it over. It never ends.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. How do you keep track something like Degrassi or Wynona Earp, where you have a history and almost a mythology for Wynona Earp, right? How do you keep track of that to know what happened before, so you're not like, oh no, you're forgetting, Degrassi dated this person, or face this challenge?
Yeah, this is where Wikipedia comes in very handy. I will say I started working on Degrassi in season 11. So at that point, there had been many, many episodes of the show. I think we crossed 300 while I was still working on that show. And then it went on to like a bazillion more episodes. But I was like, I got to Google this. I don't know. Like, it's impossible to track. No one could possibly keep all of that story and all those character arcs and things that have happened in their head. Wynona Earp, you had Emily Andres, who was a showrunner, who was her show, who just had it. She just had it all in her head. She knew every single thing that had happened, every moment, everything she had wanted to do going forward. And it was just sort of, up to us writers to check with her and pull out all this little bits and pieces that she had to make sure. You also have a story coordinator who is usually your point person, usually a person who's very good at research and tracking and, probably has a few documents they've squirreled away over the time where it's just like, I'm just gonna have a document of all the nicknames that they've said. So, if at any point someone asks me what so-and-so called so-and-so in episode whatever, they can pull it up and seem like brilliant that they remembered. But on the Hardy Boys, like we were just constantly pulling stuff from the books in terms of characters and locations and like various little fun things for anyone who, might happen to watch it and little Easter eggs and stuff like that. And we had documents, we had spreadsheets, someone's doing it. It's not me, but there is generally someone tracking a lot of things. And again, the internet is great. Like, because fans, I'll tell you right now, fans of shows are tracking this stuff way closer than anyone else.
And this is a good way to end this section. Ramona, I wanted to look up something for you. It was one of your awards or something I wanted to check. And so I'm like, I'll just do a quick internet search. And the best information was actually on a Degrassi, their wiki
fan page.
Yeah. And it has a whole page for you because you're a writer on the show with your picture. I mean, I'm like, wow. Yeah, they are really, really into Degrassi.
Yeah. To a very strange degree. It's like red hair, blue eyes. I'm like,
that's right.
That on there?
It describes your physical characteristics. Honestly, Ali, you got to check it out. I'm going to link to it.
And you're a writer. Just to refresh people's memory, Ramona is a writer. There is absolutely no need for anybody to know what a writer looks like. This is one of the beauties of being a writer. You can sort of have this anonymity, but not when the fans get hold of you, I guess.
No, the internet, I've worked on a few shows with very intense fan bases, and they will find you. You cannot hide. They will find you. It's all lovely. I've had very lovely interactions with people, but also like just arm's length. It's okay. Thanks for watching.
I remember working with a Canadian actor, and we were working at the CBC in Toronto, and there's 4 different exits you can leave. And one day we're leaving an exit together, and there's a gentleman just standing at the exit waiting for her with her headshot. Could you sign this headshot? And she signed it, and she was silent. And I was like, oh, were you not comfortable signing your headshot for him? Was that weird? She was like, no, the weird part is, how did he know I was going to leave that exit? There's 4 different ways out. Plus you can go underground. How did he know I was going to? So the fans can be, it's, he was perfectly nice. I was right there, but the whole thing was creepy, but he wasn't creepy.
Yeah. These are not things people should generally know. Yeah.
No.
And that's a Canadian actor, right? Like you
I know.
10x that for someone who's like, forget it.
I think this is a good time to talk about, we spend the last 15, 20 minutes that we have talking about this strike. It would be weird if we didn't, right? It's and obviously we wanted to make sure people understand you are not part of the Writers Guild of America. And that is who is on strike right now, the WGA in Hollywood. They call them the Hollywood Writers. In mid-April, April 17th, WGA members overwhelmingly approved a strike authorization vote. And that gave the Guild, which has over 11,500 TV and movie writers in it, to initiate a strike once the two sides were unable to make a deal. They were unable to make the deal. And that vote was approved by 97.78% of the members. So overwhelmingly, in favor of this strike. I don't know if that's common to see those type of numbers when an organization is going to strike. So we kind of wanted to, we've sort of done the reading. There's a Vox article, a New York Times article, a Variety article Asif and I have combed through to, give some context to people. We'll have those posted as well. But we really, given your knowledge of the strike, and first of all, let's back things up. Do you support the strike, or is this all a bunch of nonsense? Let's start with that.
I 100% support the strike. I think the shifts that have happened in film and television over the last, 10 years, not even, have been huge. And, there's been decisions made about how the creatives are to be treated and compensated for their work that is not equal to the money that is being made off of their creations and their work. And I think, as always, the writers are always kind of the first people up over the hill. They kind of just go for it every time. And, I think, again, as you said, I'm not a Writers Guild of America member. I'm part of the Writers Guild of Canada. I work under Canadian contracts, which is a totally separate issue. We are not on strike. We are happily making our Canadian television shows.
But on that note, does that strike, like so many things in the US, how there is often a trickle-down effect into Canada, do you expect to see some sort of, I don't know if benefit is the right word, but if the WGA has, their conditions are met, will that be beneficial then to the WGC? Are there things that Canadian writers are going to benefit from? Are you looking for certain precedents to be set, or do you really not have a quote unquote skin in the game other than supporting your fellow writers?
I think our industry is very different from the US Hollywood industry. It's interesting. There was a tweet from a UK writer after the strike went through, and the British Writers Guild and the Canadian Writer, all the international guilds were very supportive and released statements supporting the WGA and their fights for these various things. And there was a tweet from a UK writer who said, "I 100% support what they're fighting for, but it's weird because what they're fighting for and against is the way we work." In the UK. And we very much, and it's similar in Canada, like our rooms and how our contracts work is very much what the WGA is not wanting to do. So there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance a little bit, because we support them, but we also work in very small rooms for very short periods of time with very little set experience for junior writers, which is sort of the top
for
line.
Very little money.
Very little money. We don't get residuals in Canada. These are all the things that they're fighting to maintain.
That's interesting.
They're fighting to maintain.
You don't get residuals.
We don't get residuals.
Okay.
You might get, I think maybe I got like $100 off a Degrassi episode from a million years ago once. But in Canada, we get production fees. So when the show actually goes into production, we get a percentage based on whatever the budget of the episode is. So if an episode of The Hardy Boys goes into production, based on whatever the budget of that episode is given to the writer. If that episode does not go into production, I do not get that production fee. So that is to take place of a potential residual, but that's a one-time fee. Whereas residuals back in the good old days, every time your episode of Cheers aired on whatever syndicated network a bazillion times, you would get a nice juicy check and you lived off your residuals forever. That doesn't happen anymore.
So it doesn't happen for Canadian writers.
No.
And Ali, do you get residuals as an actor?
No, you get residuals if you act in commercials.
Yes.
If your commercial re-airs, you'll see some buckaroos come. None of my commercials were successful enough to be re-shown a second time, so I don't really know anything about that world.
You've heard rumors?
No. I've heard rumors. Yeah. What do I get? I get like an annual check, the Performers' Rights Society. So there's certain, I'm so ignorant about the financial elements of my own business, but I do get certain things later, but that almost feels like a settlement of like, oh, we still owed you this because of this. We still owed you this.
We had this extra money. Here you go.
Yeah.
So then I guess the issue, if I understand it correctly, is the Writers Guild in the US wants residuals from streaming mainly, it seems.
Right.
That's what they want.
Right.
And so is that correct? That is
right. They want an infrastructure put in place that allows the writers to receive residuals for the episodes that are being played on their platform. It's not something, and I don't know the nitty-gritty of the math or how that all is supposed to shake out or what they're actually looking for, but The issue is that once your episode is on that platform, that's where it stays. It's never going to go anywhere else. So theoretically, the money isn't being generated by a sale to, a station in Australia or India or wherever. It's just going to be coming from the buckets of money that platform is making somehow, that they can't be filtered down to any of the people who put content on their channel. But I think the interesting thing is that usually that's based on success and some metric of success and how many times that episode was watched, right? Like an episode of Cheers, they know how many times it got sold and aired. So they can do the math. Okay, it aired 50 times here. We can do the math. We can put it in a spreadsheet. Now we have a number to spit out to our writer. On streaming platforms, they don't like anyone to know what's going on. So there's no metric by which a writer can negotiate or understand how much a residual should be.
So just to be clear, they know, but they don't want others to know. Is that right?
They don't tell their producers, their writers, their actors. Every once in a while, you get a press release saying like 2,000 billion minutes of whatever got watched, which means nothing to anyone who might want to get paid for how many billions of minutes were watched of the thing they wrote. That doesn't mean anything. So they don't want to share the data. They can't do the math. They can't plunk those into a spreadsheet and spit out a number. So the Writers Guild is basically saying, like, share your data, tell us how successful or not successful we are so we can make money off of our work. They don't want to do that.
So they would just get paid a set amount for writing this show, X number of episodes, or you're in the writing room for the show, and that's it.
Yeah, so they would get their script fee. They would get their weekly for however many weeks they worked in the room. And, a lot of those shows are being written in very short, condensed periods of time. So the weeklies are not amazing because it's like, well, you have 6 weeks to figure out 10 episodes of a season. And then you all go away and we're going to keep a showrunner and maybe one other writer to do all this production stuff.
That's super interesting. So I guess one of the issues is this idea that they have what are called mini rooms. Ollie and I were reading about this the other day, and that's what people don't like, these very small writers' rooms.
Yeah, very small writers' rooms. So you have your showrunner, you probably have your story coordinator, story assistant, sort of note keeper, tracker, and then maybe 2 or 3 other writers, which in Canada is like, this is what we do. That's just normal. We just do that. But in the States, no, like they 12, I don't even know, like a broadcast network show, 20, like they're used to that. But the streaming services don't like that model. They don't want to keep writers around. They want very short, they call it pre-green light. So it's like, hey, you guys go sit in a room for 6 weeks, write a bunch of scripts, we'll pay you. You get paid for that. And then you go away and we decide if we're going to make this show. And if we do, we're just going to keep the showrunner and the couple other dudes.
Oh, wow.
So everybody else just goes away. And it becomes a very gig economy kind of thing because those rooms are short. There's less episodes being spread around. So that means less scripts are being written by you. It's very hard to sustain. And that is not what has typically happened in sort of the Hollywood system.
And then you also mentioned that, sometimes then the show will go into production. And how is it that there are some shows that, even though there's a writer's strike right now, they're saying HBO's House of the Dragon is probably the biggest one. They're like, well, we have all our scripts written, so we're just going to go into production. And people say, how is that even possible?
There is a magical utopia world that they must live in where all the scripts are fine. They're all written. Also, all the prep on all 8 to 10 episodes have been done because there is a whole prep period with 40 meetings, 50 meetings that happen with various keys, heads of departments, directors, actors, stunt people, visual effects people. All those meetings lead to notes that need to be synthesized and implemented into those scripts. So not only have all the scripts been written in the writer's room, they've also gone through all the prep on those scripts, done all those meetings, made all those changes, issued all those pages to all the departments, and they've gone into production with a flaw-free, never went over, got every shot, never rained, no actor got sick. Like that is this magical utopia. There's some world where that potentially is how they're doing it.
It feels like you might be suggesting that House of the Dragon is a house of the lies.
House of the lies. look,
maybe. Who knows, huh?
Allegedly,
Or
this is what
that fantastical universe
that
exists.
fantastical, flaw-free, magical land where they're making a very difficult, very expensive show is fine. It's fine. The alternative is that someone's doing it and who that person is just doing it.
Or like a scab work.
Basically.
Or not even, it could be a producer or a director or a poor script coordinator who's been pressured into, it's not good. It's not a good situation for anyone. And to be honest, House of the Dragon, as difficult that is, I can't imagine it being a fun time just normally. They're not having fun. It is not a good time for those people.
Right.
They're struggling.
Yeah.
Asif and I were actually talking about the last strike in 2007, just based on some of the stuff we read. And I remember that strike because I lived and worked as a comedian in Montreal, and there were American comedians, Canadians who had become Americans who were coming back to Montreal to live with their parents. I remember Barry Julian, who was a staff writer with the Stephen Colbert Show, who's now the head writer of the Stephen Colbert. He was coming, and for me, it was like, this is amazing. I get to see Barry Julian because he had left Montreal years before. But yeah, he painted a kind of a bleak picture for he and his wife both, I think, were writers or affected by the writer's strike in any case. And it's just like, we don't know. We don't know.
And that strike lasted 100 days. That is a long time. It obliterated a ton of shows. You know, it was not good. And for them to say it's all fine and dandy, we're not, part of the reason House of the Dragon is not being affected is because it's not shooting in the States, right? They're wherever they are, Europe, Croatia, I don't even know where they shoot it. And Lord of the Rings, they're in Australia, New Zealand. They're not in the States, but the amount of shows that have shut down already within 12 days, I guess, for not even 2 weeks that have stopped shooting, they just were because of the pickets is incredible. All the top HBO shows, a ton of broadcast shows, Stranger Things going down is huge. Yeah. It is a huge deal. Show, and for them to say it's fine, we have a lot in the bank. I'm like, that show, those kids are going to be 45.
Oh,
right.
Or they're going to look it anyway.
It's wild. With the pandemic delaying it as long as it did, and to have this, if this strike goes on for 100 plus days, it's not going to be a good scene. And they need to. It's so little money. When you actually look at the numbers, it's
Yeah. We're really talking about making the obscenely wealthy slightly less obscenely wealthy. Yeah. That's the way I break it down. And that's how you can describe, whatever, pharmaceuticals, grocery stores, all this kind of stuff. It's all about, can you very wealthy stakeholders just take a little less home every year? Impossible. Just completely inconceivable, it appears.
Ollie and I were talking, I guess there's an example from 2007, the James Bond movie, Quantum of Solace.
Yeah.
It was unfinished. And because there are writers, as Ramona was implying, on set, and you guys have worked with them. I mean, Ramona is a writer, and Ollie's worked with the writers on the set. So they're constantly writing it. I guess they already started filming and the script was unfinished. So it was Daniel Craig and Mark Forrester trying to write the script. And, well, we all know how that turned out. Exactly. Is it your favorite James Bond movie? It's not.
It is not. And even them being they're like, what the hell? What are we doing? We don't know how to do this.
That's it. Daniel Craig said, "A writer I am not." And meanwhile, there I was with director Mark Forster, working on it. So definitely. There's another element that has become so critically important in such a short period of time. I mean, some people were well aware of it years ago, just because they're able to see how things will develop in the future. But just with ChatGPT's presence in the last few months and, AI already in its numerous iterations, we've been able to see how much stronger it gets. And there are screenwriters who worry about, how long it's going to be before AI starts writing scripts. And a very interesting, very informative thing I saw was Justine Bateman, who many of us will remember as Mallory from Family Ties. Justine Bateman had a series of tweets, which we'll link to, about AI and how it relates to screenwriting and acting. So not just the writing, but the actual portrayal of your image. And so now the latest tweets were, can you send me anybody who's had in their contract something about, what is the clause around sharing not sharing. Why am I saying sharing? That's so courteous.
Feeling.
Giving away your likeness to a production company.
Right.
And those lines, people have been sharing it. Those lines are, you agree as the actor to give us your likeness and any resemblance of your likeness and any resemblance thereof now and forever in perpetuity. I mean, you're just, you're selling your image and everything. So it just feels like constantly unprotected against these things. What are your thoughts about AI as it pertains to your profession? Are these conversations you have with your colleagues?
The fact of the matter is eventually, no matter what artificial intelligence you use in terms of writing, the actor thing is very scary. And I worry incredibly for actors just because their images can be manipulated so easily and maliciously. It's very scary. In terms of like the screenwriting element, I feel like eventually, at some point, your little AI robot writer is going to run into a human, and that human is going to make it very difficult for that screenplay to continue on. And by that, I mean an AI, GTV, whatever, can probably write a decent Fast and the Furious movie. You feed in all the scripts that have come out, it's going to pop out something that's probably fine. But eventually, you're going to need a human to make that screenplay work. And you're going to need producers, financiers, studio executives, directors, production designers. Vin Diesel is going to show up at some point and say, we need something to change. And for that to synthesize all those opinions, all those notes and ideas, whatever Vin Diesel does or doesn't want to do today, you need a human. So all that's doing for a studio or a producer is taking out one stage of the writing process, thinking it's going to be a nice shortcut and it'll be fine. It is not going to be fine. You are going to ultimately need a writer to come in to make it better, to make all these revisions and changes, to do the work to get it to the place where you can actually make it shootable. And you're delaying the inevitable. To me, I feel like eventually you're going to be like, oh, we need a writer. Like, you can probably, and honestly, there probably have been, maybe not so much in Hollywood, but I'm sure in other international, film communities, AI movies have already been made. Some stuff's just not good and it's fine and it gets made all the time. And that is probably what is going to end up being the result of AI script writing. But, where it's no good for writers, and I think what the WGA is saying is like, do you commit to not using AI to write your scripts? Yes or no? And they are like, we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Later, we'll discuss it at another time. And they just want to say, they just want them to say, no, like, we're not going to do that. And they don't want to do that. And that's scary.
They don't want to say that. Oh my God, it's so bad. And then there's other ethical issues that come up. So if you do generate an AI script, should the people who created the AI algorithm get story credit and get these residuals that everybody's talking about?
Exactly.
Or also, the problem with AI is it's used for something like medicine because it's searching a bunch of different things that you assume are factual, right?
Yep.
But obviously, when you're looking at the ideas that it generates from internet for something that's supposed to be a novel creative process, it clearly is going to be infringing on what other people have written. It just has to be.
It opens them up, like studios and executive, it opens them up to liability because it's all just the Wild West, right? Like it's all just panning for gold and like nobody owns anything. And it's just, it's not, I don't think it's smart for them to think that's a good idea. Like, I'm just like, guys, no.
Yeah.
That's where my brain goes to. I think it will be bad. And I think you're going to eventually need a writer. And I think you're going to open yourself up. The only reason you can make a decent Fast and the Furious movie out of an AI machine is because there were 7 of them.
Yeah, it's formulaic.
Yeah, but it's also, the world has been created, the characters have been created. Now, the formula has been locked in and now you can spit it out the other side. It's, Justine Bateman's, the most alarming thing that she tweeted was there is a way for someone to make an 8th season of Family Ties. They could do it with our images and the 167 episodes that we made. That, I don't know if that's the right number, but pumping them in. Someone could literally draw it, make it, put it on YouTube, but then those people are just going to get sued. So I'm like, it's weird. It's a weird thing. There's one thing for fans to do it, fan art, fan fiction. I'm going to, take a bunch of clips and make a new whatever Star Wars movie and put it up on YouTube. There's one thing about doing like that. There's a difference between that and a studio deciding that's how we're going to do things. You shouldn't. That's not what you want.
Totally.
You know, it's very scary for them to even just not want to engage in the conversation because
Very telling.
Yeah,
very
it's very
telling,
telling, and it also makes them seem like we don't know either, but we're just going to leave the door open just in case this all goes
Because
south.
God forbid we protect you, because that might, leave
Yeah.
us in a place where we're not able to rip you off.
Yeah.
This feels like an episode that raises more questions than it answers,
Sorry, guys.
but I'm happy with that. No, I'm happy with that. I think Asif and I both, it's a conversation that leads to more conversations about the same and potentially alarm and concern, and that is okay also. Even if your alarm is just like, will my favorite show not have a third season? Good. Be concerned. Get involved with get knowledgeable about the stuff that's happening.
And I would say compared to like the 2007 strike and this strike, it does feel like the general public is much more aware of the value that writers bring to projects. They understand what a showrunner is. They get who the internet in that way has allowed people to support in a way that maybe they didn't quite understand in the last strike. And I think that's a good thing because they're like as soon as you see charts of people's salaries, billionaires' salaries versus the amount of money, like that's very clear. And a person who doesn't know anything about the industry will look at that and be like, yeah, that's crap. Like pay them. Let's get going. So that is an interesting thing as well.
Pay them. Let's get going. Print those T-shirts as soon as you can. Get them to the picket lines, and they'll sell like hotcakes. Ramona, thank you so much. Really appreciate you weighing in here. We've taken you away from the projects that you were probably working on. You've already painted yourself as a writing machine, so we've taken you away from money that you should have been paid in a way.
What are we doing here?
Are we protected against Ramona suing us?
I've been
texting my agent throughout.
Yeah, that's right.
He's going to send you a bill.
But yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Pleasure talking to you, and I hope we meet in person someday soon.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Ramona. So that's our episode for today. Ali, very interesting stuff talking to Ramona about the screenwriting process, how she broke in, and especially about the Writers Guild of America strike. Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I was very happy to have a guest come in and lend their own experience about a writing room, right? Because every writing room is different. She's obviously, very aware of how fortunate she is to have been in some really great rooms, but knows all the stories. It's like it can be a pretty painful process in there. And if not for the work that you do in a writing room, then for the environment that you have to kind of, tolerate and withstand, you should be paid appropriately.
Absolutely. And your thoughts on AI were also interesting. And it reminds me, there's a parallel, right? Like in medicine, people are like, oh, AI is going to replace you. It's like, it's not. And we did a whole episode on AI a couple episodes ago, which you guys could listen to, talking about AI does have a lot of uses in medicine, but replacing physicians, it probably is not going to, at least not right now. And I think Ramona was talking about similar things for screenwriting, right? Like the Hollywood execs, like, yeah, we're just having AI, bang out this script. Like they really don't understand what goes into screenwriting. And so I could see a parallel there for sure.
Says you.
But remember, reach out to us, drvcomedian@gmail.com, Dr. V Comedian on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are everywhere. Let us know what you guys thought about this episode, what you guys think about the writer's strike, anything else you guys want to hear about in that kind of realm. And remember that although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. Medical issues we talk about are for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Thanks for listening.
Bye.